Hello, Nevada County. This is David Clark Carroll with the Nevada County Tech Connection. We're on an initiative of the Nevada County Economic Resource Council, really tasked with looking at the intersection of technology and business, education, entertainment, manufacturing. I mean, at this point, it's just about everything under the sun. So really stoked to have tonight Ethan Hunter and Jacob Grissom on the show. Now, both of these folks I've talked to before in various forums. We had Jacob on last year talk about digital marketing using Facebook, videos out there with some really cool tools and just little tidbits on how to really maximize that. Ethan, you may recognize from a whole bunch of things. He's hosted a WordPress series, design series, and I was joking with him earlier, this is going to be the first time where all he has to do is talk. I'm going to pull some answers out of him. There's no PowerPoint here. And that's really what TechTonic TV is all about. It's taking a break to talk to the people that are in these fields and, look under the hood a little bit and see what it takes to do what they do. Now, the topic tonight is one of those things that is so omnipresent if you're not disabled that you rarely think about, how do I access data? Most of us, we look at our smartphone. We, maybe hear that phone ring, hear that notification in the corner. But what if you're vision impaired? What if you have hearing loss? And there's a whole range of factors that are going to how we interact with both the world and the web. That's really tonight's topic. How do you make your website accessible to everybody? And what advantages does that bring to you? And also what's kind of your, in my view, moral obligation to make things accessible for people? Because it's 2022. We have the ability to do this. So let's do it. Without much further ado, I'm gonna let Jacob Griscom talk about how the company R&B Communications can really get into that world and make it happen.
Sure, yeah, sounds good. I'll give kind of a framework and then let Ethan dive into the nuts and bolts of it. So when we're looking at a website, we're looking at a website to either solve a business problem or a problem for customers, or at the most fundamental level, be a part of a business's marketing foundation, where they're going to need to communicate effectively what they do, who they do it for, and how, be found effectively in search, and then convert traffic effectively into a lead or a customer or a user or whatever the outcome is that website's designed to achieve. We focus so much on that we distinguish building a website from what we call building a marketing hub at the foundation of your website concept. So that, if it's not if it's not producing the outcome for a business it's supposed to be, basically 24/7 tirelessly, then it's really not doing its job. And it may look good, it may be whatever, but it's failing at some way in either achieving the trust tipping point needed to convert traffic into an inquiry, or give a meaningful user experience where they perceive value and want to come back and use it over and over again. So that, along with a business's online reputation, right, would make up their marketing foundation. And we would want to make sure that that's really checked off and optimized before we invest time, money, energy into active search strategies, or certainly into passive prospect strategies. So instead, before we're going for, let's increase your visibility, let's do your SEO, let's look at your social media marketing or email marketing, like all those things are going to be things that are a way to turn that faucet on once you've got a solid bucket there that's not filled with holes, and all that energy is just going to drain right back out. So ADA, this is a really interesting concept, and not one that was on my radar nearly enough either until Ethan came on the team and we started hearing more and more need from clients for it as well, which is, of course, so you're trying to match your products and services up with an audience. All right, well, for just about every audience, we're sure there's probably some percentage of them that are going to have some level of impact on some portion of their senses. all right, so that's something that's going to affect conversion. Now, there are some businesses whose audiences may have a lot of people in that space. We're working with a company out of Sacramento whose audience is focused on, basically around Medicare services. Well, guess what? Like that, by definition, is an audience who's likely to have some issues, some impairment to their senses, simply the nature of the age that they're targeting, right? And so even for a large company like that they haven't given proper consideration to that outcome. So definitely, as you said, important conversation to have on the radar, and important to get into the pieces. So in my mind, that's where it kind of fits into the mindset that we should be approaching this through. And then the question just becomes like, okay, so now we know the why. It's focused on improving conversion, which is directly connected to improving user experience. Guess what's also directed to search engines appreciating that websites have taken that, a search engine's whole goal is give a better experience to their users as well. So these are all variables that are going to help the business achieve its goals and better serve their clients, customers, members, associates, whatever it is. So that's the why of it. So then the next piece is like, well, what is it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and it's just so great that you bring up your bucket metaphor was great, because I think so many people go, okay, I've got a website. It's got my address, my email address, and, maybe a phone number. I'm good. Maybe they stuck a little Shopify, shopping cart in there, but they never thought about what's the user experience.
Yeah.
And we've all had that experience where we're staring at your phone, trying in vain to just order something or literally send them an email, and it just does not work. So one of the things that I think I talked about this with Ethan a while ago, is we're already aware of the need to make things mobile friendly. So it feels like such a natural outgrowth of this to be like, okay, how can we make it so people can use our website and be converted from, casual browsers to clients, to customers? So yeah, really like that bucket metaphor, because so many folks, I think, just like pull all the stops out on social media, start buying ads, start trying to figure out how to target people, and they're targeted them to something that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And so, and to also get right that this is not just like a nice thing to do for people. No, this is an element of conversion that if you're not doing it right now, it's costing you, depending on your audience, it's costing you a little, or maybe costing you a lot. But if you haven't at least gone through, even the mental exercise of, hey, how does this impact us? Hopefully, this is now on people's radar, right?
well, and it's a really important way to frame it, because I mean, we have the Americans for Disabilities Act. There's improved access everywhere compared to, I'm not that old, but compared to when I was a kid, there's vastly improved access. But you still have people, like, let's say, attending a state school, who have to go blocks out of their way to get into their classroom, So I think people's mentality around, they hear ADA, they hear accessibility, they think, okay, this is going to be a convoluted thing for a small group of people. And it's no, this is directly helping you as a business reach customers.
absolutely.
And get their business. And I think that's a really important frame to bring to this, and just get people's head out of, oh, we have to accommodate people. It's no, you have to make them potential customers, as opposed to non-entities who you can't do any business with you because you made it impossible.
Yeah, in the same way that student, if they have a choice on where to go to school, that may be one of the variables about where to go, right? So
Exactly.
Yes, I mean, it's exactly that. I mean, like you said, it's the right thing to do, but it's also conversion. It's kind of the law, like you said. We have the 88 rules out there, but even though the Justice Department doesn't have something set in stone, they have some kind of compliance guidelines, they call them. And then niche, target audience, making sure SEO, loss of sales and leads, right? Because you're not making it accessible for those people. And yeah, and you know, you could be liable. There is that possibility. I don't see anybody going out there right now getting sued for having a non-compliant site, you know, but I know Domino's got sued for their app, you know, by somebody. I know McDonald's, you know, they were making kiosks because that's the new thing to order your Big Mac. And they were having some user issues around accessibility too. And so, you know, they took them down and reworking them. You know, we were talking about VR earlier and how people are engaging in that. So not only in the website space, right, but digitally, just in general. But yeah, I mean, so I think you nailed it on the why there. You know, I think Jacob nailed it. It makes good sense to, you know, to do a good website, and accessibility is part of that. You know, it's part of plugging the drain.
Yeah.
You know, as Jacob, you know, the bucket, you know, as he uses a metaphor. So yeah.
Well, and it's also one of those things that it's not just for people who are disabled. Everyone's had a hard time interacting with the website. I was giving examples of like shopping carts, but there's also color choices, contrast choices,
Absolutely.
simple stuff that, you know, really affect the experience profoundly, to the point where, you know, you don't want to be a website that gives you a headache. You know, the amount of business you're going to give someone who just gave you a headache for clicking on their site is pretty much zero, right?
Yeah, I mean, and contrast is good, right? You brought that up, right? Color. So, you know, that's one of the guidelines there that we try to strive for, is something that we look at.
What are the big categories? It's color.
So, I mean, the big categories are, let's grab my notes here. So alt text, right? So that would be like the biggest category, I would say, right? So what is alt text? Because that sounds like kind of a geeky word, right? So alt text is, you have an image, a dog running, you know, in some grass, chewing on a bone. Well, guess what? People that are visually impaired can't read that, right? So they need to have what we call an alt text. So it's kind of something we put in the code for people that are using those devices that are visually impaired, Shark being one of them. So they go to that image and it tells them, hey, dog running in the grass with a bone. And that's one that'll definitely, you know, hurt you in your visibility in search engines and just kind of overall right there. It's just not doing that. And, you know, Google and other search engines definitely, you know, look for that right away. And you'll even see, like, have you been on Facebook where like,
Well, and we'll be specific about the two ways that is. So one is it's context for Google to read that picture and say like,
exactly.
oh, great, this is the keyword that this person is searching for. Secondly, specifically for image results, when people are looking for images,
Yep.
It's only going to show if it's, you know, relevant to what somebody searched for.
So that one's like threefold, right?
Yeah.
You're dealing with accessibility, you're dealing with keyword searching and ranking and all in images, you know, like Jacob. So, you know, that's a big one, right? So Jacob said, you know, let's describe some of them. Color contrast, right? That's another big one. Making sure, and this is kind of a geeky one, but making sure your headers and things are sequential. You know, a lot of people that are visually impaired, you know, they're not seeing, you know, they're not clicking on the mouse and going, all right, I'm going to go here, or they see header, you know, so they need to know, you know, where is this in the hierarchy of things? Is this the title of the page? Is this the header? Is this the subheader? Is this a paragraph? Oh, now we're in another header. And so it's in navigation, you know, in that regard. And that also helps for people who are mobility challenged. So maybe they need to use just the keyboard. They can't use a mouse, you know, or something like that. So that's also another thing, is that kind of those sequential ways of putting in the code, right? So we got what color, alt text, making sure like all your images and or like your video, making sure it has captioning, you know. Those are really important things that don't necessarily maybe help as much in SEO ranking, but it's one of the things that, you know, you'd want to do for you know, accessibility issues.
Well, and with you talking about page hierarchy, I think that's one of those things where if you're making yourself think about it for accessibility purposes, you're going to wind up with a better site. It's going to be structured. You're not just like sticking pieces together and being like, that looks pretty good. Because I've gone back and tried to fix sites that I made myself, just kind of fly by night.
You know what I'm thinking of as you bring that up is like the idea of that if you want to have somebody really be able to get to the essence of a topic, you say, okay, explain it like you would to a fourth grader. Like, can you get to the essence of what you're trying to communicate to here in the most basic way? Likewise, if you were feeling around, metaphorically in the dark, you're like trying to get your bearings around major aspects of the space that you're in, right? Which is different than if the lights are on, you can see everything clearly. So you're kind of architecting in the same way. So you're going to say like, all right, let's create the major signposts, which yes, are valuable for somebody who doesn't have the lights on, but it's going to be that much better and more organized when the lights are on as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there's like next level stuff. So, there are different, what we call grades of, basically the Justice Department, I'll just kind of sidetrack for a second. So the Justice Department doesn't necessarily have a law. They have a law, but they don't have one necessarily maybe for websites. But what they have is a web content accessibility guidelines, right? And so then that they have what we call grade A, grade AA, and grade AAA. Most people are probably going to be grade A. Grade AA would be people that are really going to make sure they want to target that, or people that are kind of mandated to. So like, schools, people that are like governments, public serving type websites. They're all kind of mandated to have that AA thing. And then there's the AAA. So like AA, AAA would be things like audio descriptions too, So also having descriptions in audio for certain things, text transcripts. So, having different ways of being able to read things. Sometimes people like load up a PDF, but sometimes those screen readers in particular, if they haven't like made it in rich text or format that the screen reader can read, well, then that person goes on and can't access that document. And so those are like kind of what we would say like better, like second level, kind of, grade A, grade AAA. Other things could be like making sure things are like kind of descriptive headers and links and things like that as well. So making sure that those are, properly tagged. And that's definitely more in the, what we call like AAA category,
I'd love to loop back and talk a little bit more about PDFs, because I think that's one of the things that a lot of, particularly nonprofits, I've run into this a lot with hiking trails, where you'll be trying to find a map for a hiking trail, and it just takes you to a PDF download. And you mentioned a couple terms I'm not super familiar with, rich text, and basically, how do you go about making sure your PDF is going to be readable in that context?
Is basically a setting in your PDF where if it's textual, you just make sure that that's there.
Okay. I mean, like, I think that's something a lot of people just aren't aware of. They think, oh, it's a PDF, it's text.
Right.
But
a lot of people don't, you know what I mean? Like, or they'll put images without all text again. And, that's where it becomes a whole different, that's why there's grades that people, shoot for, because some people are like, wow, that's really intensive. But, some people want that or need that. And then, always going to strive for at least grade A, and then you go to your second tiers there, depending on how far you want to be. But yeah, PDFs are horrible for some people.
I'm just so fascinated with them because they're so omnipresent, and almost no one likes dealing with them at some point, as far as like, oh, I was hoping to just like, maybe look at where the trailhead starts. Instead, I have to like scroll around on this like giant file on my phone trying to find it in the corner. And with text in particular, like, you could have a 20-page document there, like, so.
And it's kind of it's a nightmare for sometimes for web developers too, because we have to, depending on what you want, you have to look at that, and that requires a lot. You know what I mean? It's not, and here's the other thing about web accessibility and you know, helping and serving people make that audit or make those changes or needs, you know, if they're not doing it themselves, is that I lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was saying.
Well, you mentioned audits, and you
Yes.
know, so one of the things we do is we always like to get an article. So there's a great article on our website written by Jennifer, where you talk about audit and advise the client as to where they are and what they can do to improve. So not to completely take over your train of thought, but when you come into that role where you're looking at a site, how many times are you pleasantly surprised and find that, like, okay, there's not a whole lot to do here compared to, oh, we've got a lot we can do.
So one thing that we do, we work a lot in WordPress, right? So
Yeah,
WordPress is really cool. By default, it really helps kind of get that stuff going. You know, there's a lot of stuff back in the coding. And actually WordPress right now is releasing another version, and it's all to their core, because they update it quite often, and it's a lot around accessibility. So it, you know, WordPress being kind of a nonprofit, you know, of dedicated kind of volunteers, they just came out with that like in the last couple of weeks, and it's in beta right now. So that's kind of a huge advantage for us, you know, because of the soft, you know, the system that we use, particularly in house. So, and the system that I work with, you know, a lot. So it's not that, that's what I wanted to say. So accessibility isn't just like turnkey and you're done. You know what I mean? It's something that you have to think about. And it's something that anytime you're adding content to your website, adding PDFs to your website, you know, that's why it's always good to like inform those who are entering that kind of stuff, or, you know, hire people or ask people to, you got to kind of do quarterly or annual kind of audits to make sure, like, are my ducks in a row? You know what I mean? So I think, you know, like that's one thing in WordPress, you know, that there's plugins, right? Extensions, or basically they're added functionality. One thing you can do is you'll see it on a lot of people's the little like disability guy, you know, in the corner, and you know, you go and click on that, and it's got different contrasts and scalable text and all that. And so people like put that on, and they're like, cool, we're good. And that's good to do, because I think it allows enough, you know, kind of, hey, I'm making an effort, and I'm also kind of trying to provide some tools. You got to understand that like some of the people that are disabled do have some tools at their hand, you know, some software, some hardware that they're kind of, you know, learning to interact already with the internet. So basically it comes down to, but the idea is that it's an ongoing process. It's something that you have to be conscious of, whether you're a web developer or a content creator. And that's, you know, that was kind of what I wanted to say earlier to you, was that's, you know, you don't just turn the key and say, all right, my site's good. I mean, yeah, you do good practices. So you know, you make sure your alt text there, you make sure your sequential headings there, you make sure your contrasts are there, you make sure, you know, the different things that you're trying to strive for are there, but then you always want to revisit it. And that's probably true for all of it, not just accessibility when it comes to your website, is, you know,
Yeah, we
reevaluate.
we'll say like all roads lead to playbook. So we always walk businesses through a playbook process where we're systematically going through all of the key points. And then we use that as a living document to return to. And that can be updated and informed by changes in what's working best now. So this is now like on our radar. We take on a hosting client, or certainly any site that we launch is going to go through this checklist of like, all right, does it pass these criteria now?
And that's another interesting thing too that you bring up, because there are tools out there, you know, I don't, you know, some people probably watching this don't realize, but that every browser has what we call built-in like developer tools. So there's all this really cool stuff you can do, like look at the code, look at this, look at that, and run audits and reports. You know, you can run SEO, you can run performance, and one of them happens to be accessibility. And this is pretty much built into most browsers where you can run reports. Google has a pretty good one, so that's one I use, as well as there are other online tools and basically sites where you can kind of put in your website or put in your URL or put in your page and kind of, it'll look at it for you and either say, hey, great, or say, yeah, this is good, but you can need some improvements, or hey man, you got to redo this, So that is a really good thing, especially for people that are, just curious and want to say, hey, what is my site like, or reach out to us and we can help you do that too, So but there are tools out there that you can use that are absolutely free, even just to kind of gauge where you're at. And like I said, we work in WordPress, and people don't realize this, but WordPress is like 30% plus of the internet, so that in itself,
Only that.
I think it's actually more. I'm always being a little on the shy side. I've
I
heard
was about to say,
Yeah.
I know it's 60% of like content management systems, so like Wix, Shopify, Squarespace, all those other ones, it has a foothold in there. And that's why we prefer that too, also, because that gives us a good structure to work on. And and as developers, we're going in there and when we meet a client and we talk about color, we look at contrast, not just, oh, I like these two colors, but you're like, well, these two colors don't work, and this is why. And doing those kind of things initially with the client, helping to build some of those things. Or as a developer, like I said, anytime we're putting an image in, we're making sure that we're entering alt text, and because of accessibility, because of SEO, because of keywords and things like that.
and what you're hitting on too, it's not just something you do once. It's building new habits of I'm posting new content. Do I want to have to go back 2 weeks from now and fix the content I just posted? No. So you do it right the first time.
Absolutely. And when I first started working in web development and talking to other people, I heard it peripherally, and I was like, hey, talk to people, and people like, yeah, we don't really talk about that. And because it was like, okay, well, what is my best practices? But I think that any really informed developer or somebody who really, has taken the time to delve in a little bit and has some skill and some craft, is building something good to begin with, because there are other reasons to build for accessibility, which Jacob pointed out, which is, just makes a better website. It shows up in the search results. It does a lot of those things that you wanted to do, so yeah.
Now, I wanted to get into a little bit of kind of talking about, clearly this has lots of advantages as far as driving more customers through a search engine, making it easy for customers to access it. But there's also the point where, particularly if you've got a bulky legacy website, which many people do, there's going to be a fine line between how much of the current content you can make accessible and how much of a budget you have to, like, let's say, go back and make sure those posts from like 5 or 6 years ago are there any tools that really help you do that kind of all together, or is it really, this is why you should do it right the first time?
My feeling about that is this is why you should do it right the first time. And the reason is because there really isn't a tool out there that's going to scan every single detail and fix it for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even if you ran everything and it's, oh yeah, this blog over here is horrible, you're going to have to go back in and do it yourself. And I mean, that's why there's people out there that are hireable, because not everybody wants to do that. And yeah, you really should be doing that. I would say, like, if you're working on a WordPress blog, chances are you probably didn't hurt it too bad. One of the things you'll want to look at probably is your media library, right? So go in and look at your images right away. And a lot of people just load an image and they don't put the alt text in. Or sometimes the alt text will just be the the image file, which, you know, some of us, we know our image files like image file _45422 screenshot share, whatever, you know. And so that's not descriptive at all, you know. And so that's where, yes, building the website the right way. And that's why it's good to reach out to somebody, even if you're, say you're not building it, you don't necessarily know if you want to take the leap and having somebody else do it for you, but at least reach out to somebody who knows something, and maybe can, you know, give you some audits, so to give you some direction, or, you know, like, you know what, it's really not that bad, or here's where you can improve, you know.
It's going to be proportional, of course. If you're talking about your travel blog, all right, this is probably a non-consideration,
Right.
but you have to ask, like, how much traffic is our site getting? How much value is it responsible for creating in our organization? And the bigger those numbers get, the bigger an impact a 0.1%, certainly a 1%, certainly a 5 or 10% optimization means. If you're a $100 million company and your website is responsible for, you know, the lion's share of generating at least the, you know, the top of that funnel activity, right? And you make a 1% improvement, that these are significant numbers and impacts, right? So it's going to be proportional. How deep down you go into this is proportional to the revenue that the site's responsible for, and also what percentage of your audience does this directly impact.
Those are really excellent points, particularly about what segment of the audience, because you're right, like some aspects of a website, some, you know, travel blog, maybe you've got a gallery of employee day parties, you don't need to worry about that. But the new products page, make sure that's on point, you know, and think about how, because realistically, not everyone is going to have a budget to be able to maximize everything to that AAA rating, right? It's going to be a choice of what can we afford to do, what's going to give us the most return. Because again, we're here talking about business, you know, it's great that things should be more accessible, particularly around you know, government sites, but a lot of this is how can we drive more business and get more customers. And so think about where you can put your have the most impact. Now,
know your audience, know your demographics. If it's a Medicare enrollment page, right? So
yeah, and here's another thing, like, so there are kind of who needs to do it, right? So everybody, right? But that aside, like who's you know, who's asking, you know, the government, basically, who are they asking? And so it's state and local agencies, right? Private employers with 15 or more employees, and then businesses that operate for the benefit of the public. So those are the people that we, you know, definitely should be looking at that AA.
Let's think of some examples of who falls into that third category and who doesn't.
Right. I know, that's what I was like, that's a very vague term. And this is what's really interesting about this, David, is that even though we've had the ADA, you know, act for a while in the 90s, right? And then we kind of got some digital stuff handed out to us. We don't really know how to address that fully, other than these guidelines. And so, like, as Jacob pointed out, boy, that's, you know, some of the description is a little vague. You know, like, who is the businesses that operate for the benefit of the public? You know,
is it a restaurant count?
I don't think so. I think it's more like if you're serving people. So I would imagine more like nonprofits that are like kind of maybe getting grants and helping the public.
It could be. I always thought if you're a good consultative salesperson, you think of yourself as a servant.
I come back to everybody should be doing this, and everybody should be doing this because it's target rich.
Yeah,
it makes sense, not only from a good feels good level, but and you know, you're missing people by not at least taking consideration, and it creates best practices. And you know, if you meet somebody who's making a website for you and they're not concerned about that, I would say that's a red flag, because that's another thing that they're not paying attention to the fact that this is important. You know, from a business standpoint, from, you know, an entity standpoint too.
So do you think that web design businesses would fall into a category of operating for the benefit of the public?
I don't think so, unless they were like
I guess they could become
just
that if they
serving.
focus
Yeah,
on
I think it has. It's a weird. Like I said, that's why it's funny because you know, and that's why we have guidelines, right? But I think, who would I say? I would say schools. I would say libraries. I would say anybody who's really forward facing like that. Even people, e-commerce, like for example, like don't alienate your people, don't alienate, 20% of the market share or whatever it is, because those people wear clothes too, or whatever, they buy soap or whatever it is. And so, to me, that's a huge part of it too, is not only like, again, is it a feel good thing, but it's the right thing to do from a lead standpoint, from a far reaching, standpoint, making your audience bigger.
And I think particularly, these days, I would say most people look an item up online before they go in person to buy it. Maybe they know ahead of time that store will have it in stock. Maybe they've researched it elsewhere, but very few people are just wandering the streets looking for, like, let's say, a specific pair of shoes. They know what they want. They may have looked it up. And if you can pop up on those search listings early on and have an accessible product, they might buy it. So again, this comes down to it's the right thing to do. It's going to make your website better, but it's also going to make you more money. And
yeah,
I think it's really important to frame it that way, because so many times people think of accessibility as it's going to be a cost. It's not going to be a profit. It's going to be a cost. And it's like, no, this is not the case here. This is literally going to bring you more people.
You know that in sales, that you never use that word. That's a dirty word. You always say, what's the investment? Because an investment implies that there will be some value to that investment, potentially even some return that could be quantified. And so I'd agree, right? This is anything that you're doing. Again, if your website gets traffic, if it's responsible for generating value for your organization, any optimization in it is not a cost, it's an investment, because it means that you are increasing its ability to do what it's supposed to do.
Well, it's something that Jacob and I were even talking earlier. Like, sometimes people, I've noticed in my own kind of sphere that sometimes people build a website and they think, okay, I got a website. But the question is, what is that website doing for you? And so that comes down to, how was it built, in part, and accessibility and things like that being that. But yeah, it's exactly it. It's you don't just have a website, you have a return. So anything you do, an investment, you're looking for that return. You're looking for, there's a reason why, we like to do what we do, because we're looking to enrich people, not just look for an opportunity to make a website. If people's websites are successful, then all of us are successful, right? So the community is successful. So that's important,
So it sounds like you're arguing you are a business for the common good.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Put us in that. So this now becomes interesting now that we're talking about this. I'm like, okay, well then what's the formula? How do you quantify this? So the elements you would need to know are, what traffic do we get right now? What percentage of that traffic has any level of sensory impairment? What kind of, with these improvements, what's our projected optimization to counter for those impairments? And therefore, how do we project to that to be conversion? I'm not sure that that's mapped out as a formula, maybe somewhere, but that's always what you're looking for, because you can have it theoretically and you say, well, it makes sense. But the most interesting thing, we're doing this over on the business IT support side, where we have a framework there as well. And we're talking about, okay, here's your IT foundation. It has to do with your security, your data protection. There's some things that we know, well, if you just straight up, the vulnerabilities you have right now, your potential is to lose all of your data. You have no backups, right? There goes your business. That's 100% loss, maybe even more, right? Because you actually owe other things outside of that. And then we're starting to look at infrastructure, hardware and software. How is that impacting people's morale, their productivity, their overall experience on the job, the retention of those employees? Like, these are interesting things to begin to try to quantify. And then other productivity enhancements, right? Like, are they using is their software optimized? Is their work environment optimized? All these things that become softer and softer costs that are definitely real. But it's an interesting exercise to try to make these soft costs harder, or at least put them in the general range there. So I was kind of creating a table of like, all right, if let's say you've got this employee, and here's their annual salary, and they're operating at 40% productivity. So you're paying them this much, but you're getting 40% value out of them. Here's the 60% that's responsible for the productivity bottlenecks. All right, now we can remove 30% of those with technology, for example, right? You've almost got another employee for the same salary now. But these are interesting exercises to go through. It's kind of, as I'm thinking through ADA and having a business case for it, these are the elements you'd need to know. What's your traffic? What are your audience demographics? What's percentage of them there? How much value is your site responsible for generating? And you can start to quantify this stuff.
Well, and the, in addition to the customers who may be vision impaired, have some other issue accessing the site, there's also the customers who are seeing your site because you're bumped up in the search engine rankings.
That's exactly.
So this. I'm going to have to task you guys with trying to find out some numbers on this, because you've got me curious now.
I'm not exactly sure. I know that Google does give a percentage to accessibility. I'm not sure what it is. I know that they recently kind of have changed things.
In terms of what do you mean is their algorithms preference?
Yeah, so like even optimization, like, this is some of it's ADA, but we do some optimization, so making your page load faster and things like that. Right now, that's about 10% of the score. I mean, that's and that makes sense, right? So you don't want to put like Crayon Mart, up at the top of the search engines, even though it sounds like a great name. When you go to the site and it's like clunky and it takes like 5-6 seconds to load, like, oh, this Google doesn't know how to tell me where to go, and so that's why they're looking for those things too. So like, oh, hey, this is optimized, this is accessible, this is this it's got the content, it's got the backlink, it's got all these like little things that feed it, it's got the keywords, it's fresh, it's real, it's authentic, it's the authority. And so all of those things add up to you're on page 1.
This is this was Crayon Mart, I believe you said, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Stop Emporium. All the crayons.
Are there even crayons anymore? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, waxy. That's it.
But you know what I'm saying? It's about designing something good. And accessibility.
You put 10% together, there's 100%. So every little bit really just keeps adding up.
Here are the pieces any business could work backwards. What is so if you don't know this one, here's the first one to figure out. What is the average annual value of a new customer for you, right? So knowing how many repeat, et cetera, you need to quantify that. Some businesses know here's our average transaction, but really knowing like we get a new customer on average, what's that annual value for us? Now they may have a multi-year value as well, but that's like a good starting place. So if you know the annual value, right, then your next thing you'd need to work from there is how many sales conversations, proposal, whatever your sales portion is, how many of those do you need to get a new customer? Is it 3? Is it 10? Whatever, right? So a conversion rate from sales opportunity to customer, right? So then you take it one step back. How many leads do we need to get truly a sales opportunity? All right, great. Now, how many of our leads are coming from our website? How much traffic do we need to get a lead? All right, now you've got something meaningful. So now if we're doing pay-per-click, for example, we know how much can we afford to pay for a relevant click to this website and still come out on top in terms of this annual average. If you don't know those things, then you're guessing in the dark. You're thinking, well, I think we can pay this much. But then you can know, okay, we can pay that much for traffic. So likewise, now you can say, okay, we may not know the exact increase in traffic that these optimizations are going to create, but we know that for every 1% increase in traffic, it's going to result in this much additional customer value because we know our numbers backwards. So then if we can say, all right, well, this is 10% of your optimization. If we do this, and if you increase, your traffic by X, here's the value it is. And then we just at least be conservative. Do we think we can get at least a 5% increase in overall traffic through these optimizations? Or if we can, it's going to result in this value. That's a great way to go about it.
That was awesome, Jacob. That was a rabbit hole into a wormhole straight out the other side.
but a logical path, right? It's not, there weren't anything there where you couldn't, that's an unknowable number at that point, except for this point where you have to be conservative and say, hey, if we can achieve then this, right?
Well, it's the way to, for anyone out there watching, like, oh, I don't know if this is worth me doing, run those numbers. Jacob laid it out pretty, not simply, but in a way that, I think a lot of people can follow and just think about, because every site visitor contributes to those numbers, right?
Yep. As long as you have Google Analytics in there, as long as you have your books and you have sales reports and like that. If you don't have these things, right, now you have a reason to say, oh, well, that should be a priority to get that done. But once you do have that, yeah, you can map this all the way back to the value per visitor.
This has been awesome, guys. This is I think the first panel discussion I've done in a little while. It's real cool to have more voices on. Really brings it to life here. We are getting close to the hour here, so wanted to kind of see if there were any specific final thoughts that you guys wanted to share before we completely run out of time, because that wormhole, Jacob, that was awesome.
I mean, what Jacob said, make ADA part of that, in that shift and those goals. So yeah, and it's a new frontier, and I think it's even a selling point, like, hey, I do care about this is on another level, and so I think that really is important. And as we become more and more online, we're going to see those things, like I said, even getting back to VR, like,
is it possible for us to become more online?
I think so. That's VR is more online, right. VR, right. Which is his talk next month. But what does that mean for somebody who's blind? Or I brought up the kiosk at McDonald's earlier, or the Domino's app. Not only looking at websites, but we're looking at how do we remain inclusive? Because it's a good strategy to enrich everybody in the community, right? And obviously it's a good marketing strategy, especially right now. That's where you go online to find that. So make that a priority, and don't freak out. Like, oh no, I didn't. I'm failing at it. Just be aware of it, and talk to your developer, talk to whoever, talk to us, and if you need those questions answered. And like, it's not hard to get on YouTube and figure out, like, how do I check my website for compliance? I mean, that's kind of where I started. I went to Sacramento WordCamp a couple years ago and sat in on a guy talking about it. And obviously they were in business, that's what they did. But it made me realize, like, and it was great for me because I was just starting in that sphere. So to me, it was like, this is what we're doing from day one. We're going to think on those terms when we're designing. So.
Totally. Any final thoughts, Jacob?
You always end a presentation with a call to action. It's the what if, right? So I think what it would be for us is that if you have a website and you would like us to run like a free ADA sort of audit and speed test audit along with that, and then create basically work these numbers backwards for you, all the pieces that you know, and give you some concept around, would this have a meaningful impact on you or not? Then just reach out to us through our contact form on rb-com.com, and we will do that for you.
Awesome. That is a great closing call to action, Jacob. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. I've been David Clark Carroll from the Nevada County Tech Connection. Been chatting with Ethan Hunter and Jacob Griscom from R&B Communications. And in the interest of disclosure, I will mention Ethan, does web support for NC Tech Connection. So we chat quite a bit. This was fun though. This was less like work and more like chatting about tech, which is what we're all about here. So thanks so much for joining us. Have a wonderful night, and